The full details of the Switch 2 have finally been revealed, and it's kind of weird. Thankfully, there's a 6-day gap between the announcement and pre-orders going live, which does give us a little bit of time to consider whether or not Nintendo's latest console is going to be worth it, at least at launch. Now, if you're a die-hard Nintendo fan, this video probably isn't for you. The Switch 2 will inevitably be wonderful, and it'll be a nice upgrade from the original. However, if like me you're looking at this as a more casual gamer, or from the perspective of buying a family console, which is Nintendo's bread and butter, then there are a few things to consider. Oh, and if you're looking at pre-ordering from Nintendo Direct, then you need to know about the qualifying prerequisites that they've just put in place in an attempt to stop scalpers, which I actually think will probably work. But it will inevitably be at the expense of some legitimate customers too, especially those coming to the Switch for the very first time. Firstly though, let's look at the price, which has certainly raised some eyebrows. The base console comes in at just under £400, $450 or €470. And for that you'll get the handheld console, the dock and a pair of the new Joycon controllers. Bear in mind though that these prices were released just hours before Trump's tariff announcement, meaning that the initial advertised price may not actually be the price you pay come June the 5th, if you're in the USA. Optionally, you can include a pre-installed digital copy of the highly anticipated Mario Kart World, which bumps up the price by an additional £35, $50 or €40. And I'm certain that the vast majority of people that do choose to pre-order will fork out that additional money for Mario Kart, because the standalone game costs an eye-watering £67 for the digital version or £75 for a physical copy, essentially doubling the price. I'll leave you to decide whether or not that represents good value for money, but in my opinion, Nintendo are certainly pushing it with those kinds of numbers. In terms of the hardware, there have been a number of notable changes. The screen size has increased, going from 6.2 inches on the regular Switch or 7 inches on the OLED version up to 7.9 inches. The screen resolution jumps from 720p in handheld mode up to 1080p at up to 120Hz. In docked mode, the resolution jumps from 1080p to 4K but will remain at only 60Hz. HDR support is included in both handheld and docked mode, but surprisingly, there is no option for an OLED screen. I'm absolutely certain that this will come as part of a mid-generation refresh of the console, but it's still a massive disappointment for those that will be upgrading from an existing OLED Switch. Nintendo have included a noise-cancelling microphone for use with their new PartyChat mode, finally, and have supposedly made some big improvements to the quality of audio through the speakers, even offering 3D audio. How good these improvements really are will need some testing of course, but I'm hopeful it's not just marketing hyperbole. The Kickstand has also been greatly improved, offering better support for the screen with adjustable viewing angles. The original stand on the Switch was horrible, so I'm glad that this has been addressed. They've also added an additional USB-C port to the top of the console, meaning that handheld players can now charge as they play without an annoying cable pressing into you. The built-in storage has increased from 32GB, which was ridiculous even at launch, to 256. I'm not convinced that this is still enough, but with the addition of a microSD express card, you can quite easily expand it without breaking the bank. And it must be an express version card. The standard microSD cards that you may have been using in an existing Switch will not be compatible. The express version is more expensive, but it does offer significant increases in transfer speed, which is what the Switch 2 requires. Nintendo made a pretty big deal in their product video of the new C button. And whilst it's not exactly revolutionary, it does add quick access to the new game chat functionality, which has been something long missing from the Switch. And although some of the split-screen online multiplayer videos looked a bit choppy, it did look like a great idea, especially with the addition of the Switch 2 camera, which will set you back another £50. Given the cost of the console and the games, however, I wouldn't be surprised if the camera doesn't sell that well at launch, but it's definitely the kind of thing that could be added as a future purchase, especially if friends and family agree to get one at the same time. The new Joycon 2 controllers have seen some much needed ergonomic improvements with increases to the size of the SL and SR buttons, as well as the thumbsticks. The Joy-Cons now snap into place on the Switch via hidden magnets at the side of the console, which will help reduce damage to the controllers and the console, as well as making them fit more securely. The other notable difference with the new Joy-Cons is the ability to use them as a mouse. This was demonstrated with a new wheelchair basketball style game called Drag X Drive, and whilst it looked like a cool innovation, I just don't really see the point. Surely, the vast majority of Switch users play either handheld or docked while sitting comfortably on the sofa or in bed, where there are no perfectly flat, rigid surfaces to use for a mouse. If you play at a desk, then I'm sure it'll work great, but even then, I imagine that the novelty will wear off pretty quickly, and even on games where you typically benefit from the use of a mouse, such as a first-person shooter, are people really going to use it? I'm not convinced. On the subject of games, no new Mario World. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm sure Donkey Kong Bonanza will be a great platform game, but still, I can't have been the only one that was disappointed. I'm confident it won't be too long before it's announced, likely in time for Christmas, but to not lead with your potentially biggest hitting game just seems odd to me. Not wishing to detract from Mario Kart, of course, which does look fantastic and will no doubt be people's main motivation to buy the console in the first place, especially with those drivers' numbers now increased to 24. Sony also showed off what looked to be an interactive tech demo game called the Welcome Tour. It looked pretty cool. It reminded me a bit of Astro's Playroom, which came free with the PlayStation 5. It demonstrates some of the unique features of the console and the controllers via the use of minigames and that kind of thing. The big difference though? Nintendo are not giving it away. Yes, in true Nintendo style, you have to pay for it. There was no announcement on price, so hopefully it'll be cheap, but still, come on Nintendo. That should have been a freebie. And that brings me to the next subject, which is game upgrades. A bunch of existing Switch games will have upgrades available which will improve both graphical quality and performance, but not all of them will be free, you'll have to buy them. Now, some of those upgrades come with additional content, in which case, that seems fair enough, but we'll need to wait and see just what that content is and how much the upgrade will cost. Games available at launch include Mario Kart World, that weird Welcome Tour game, Civilization 7, Cyberpunk 2077, Switch 2 versions of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, Street Fighter 6, Hogwarts Legacy, Fortnite, and a bunch of others. The likes of Donkey Kong, Borderlands 4, Kirby Air Raiders, Hyrule Warriors, Final Fantasy VII Remake, Elden Ring, EA Sports FC, and WWE are all set to release over the coming 12 months. It's a decent list of games, but what strikes me most is the lack of first-party titles, because most of those previous games have been out for some time now and can be played on other, arguably better platforms. Nintendo has always been about making cool games that can't be played on anything other than Nintendo, and that just doesn't seem to be the case here, with only a few exceptions. Whether that's a good or a bad thing, I'm not so sure, but at the price point that they want to charge, it's not far off the cost of an OLED Steam Deck, a PS5 or a Series X. So where does the Switch 2 fit in? Well, what it truly offers is gaming convenience. Being able to seamlessly go from docked to handheld, allowing you to carry on from exactly where you were in a game, is pretty great, especially if you're taking the device away from home. No need to worry about streaming or network connectivity, just simply pick up and play. Plus, the Switch is a wonderful family games console with simplistic menus, games that are fit for all ages, and solid parental controls. It might not be exactly the release that people were hoping for, it's probably overpriced, and the cost of its games are pushing us ever closer to that $100, £100 mark. But it will inevitably sell out, and I'm absolutely certain that it will pick up from exactly where its predecessor left off. Now, after all that, if you've decided that the Switch 2 is for you and you wish to pre-order directly from Nintendo, there are a couple of things that you need to know. At the bottom of the pre-order information page, it states that initial invitees will be selected based on the following criteria. You must have been a Nintendo Switch Online member for 2 consecutive years by the end of March 2025 and have an active account on the day of the pre-order, which is April the 8th. You need to have spent a certain undisclosed amount of time playing certain Switch games, with priority being given to those with the most playtime. You need to have allowed sharing of data with Nintendo and have opted in for customized offers and recommendations. And finally, you should have opted in for Nintendo's marketing emails. Make of that what you will. What's not so clear is whether you need to meet all of those criteria or whether there's some kind of ranking or priority between the 3 lists. But it does say at the very foot of the website that over time the selection criteria thresholds may be lowered and more people could be invited to pre-order a Nintendo Switch 2 console. Throughout, they will remain focused on prioritizing the most dedicated Nintendo Switch players while stocks last. That doesn't seem entirely unreasonable to me, and it's clearly aimed at stopping scalpers, which is something I'd like to see more of if it works. It does seem likely to me though that this will restrict newcomers to the Switch from being able to get their hands on one. Don't forget though that you can of course pre-order from other retailers such as Amazon or Currys if you're in the UK, both of which have now got a pre-order invitation button on their respective websites. Either way, if you're looking at getting one, I wish you the best of luck. Hopefully I'll manage to snag one myself too, as we are massive fans of Mario Kart in our house. Let me know what you think of the Switch 2 in the comments section below. Are you going to pre-order? Are you voting with your wallet, or is it simply a hard pass? Thank you for watching, and a special thanks to anybody that has liked, commented, or subscribed. Means a lot.